You're going to cut me a check, but I'm not going to see you're going to make all the money until I pay you back from the small percentage that you negotiated. Like what? This,
right.
If you were to open up a barber shop, it wouldn't operate like that, right?
Right.
Let's get it started.
Double O.
Free range, motherfucker. Check. 1, 2. You are tuned into the sounds of the Free Range Podcast with your boy Double O. Doing something interesting this episode. I wanted to not interview somebody new, but actually take a second and look back at some of the interviews that we've done thus far. Banged out 13 interviews, got a bunch more coming. And in a lot of the initial interviews, I'd cut down a ton of conversation in order to tell a more concise story. But I wanted to go back and explore some of those pieces that got chunked out because I felt like it was important. It just wasn't necessarily right for the time. So I want to start with my homie, Justin Hunt. We had a lot of conversation about the state of the music industry, how I feel about it as an artist, how he feels about it from the executive side, and the things that we think we can kind of fix over the next couple of years. We start actually outside the music industry, though. When I was a professional track athlete, there was always this underlying issue that because there was no union for the athletes, we would never be able to collectively build a fair base level compensation for everyone who was a professional within the sport. And when I moved over into music, it felt like a lot of the same thing. So we explore that idea, the possibility of unions. We talk a little bit about the structure of current label contracts and how I think that people are actually missing the point about the boogeyman in the room. Then we move on to with something that's been a through line through a lot of the interviews, and a lot of the conversations, which is how we take hip hop in the state that it's in now, with the power that it has, with the understanding that it is the driver of the cultural conversation worldwide, outside of simply America. Its tentacles are so entrenched in so many different cultures now that it feels like it can be a pathway for a vision of the future that we can all benefit from. And so in that conversation, both my first guest, Netic, and Justin had some really great insight on what those ideas might be. And so in the second half, we check those things out. Hope you enjoy it. It's a little bit shorter, but got some more coming next week. Peace. We had the same problem in track and field, right? There's no union, right? It doesn't exist. So you could basically be running 4 years and running, let's say, well, but not, let's say you come in fourth every major event in the United States. Like, the difference between what you might make if you make anything and what somebody who comes in first is getting all the time is ridiculous. You might have to fly out there. You might have to, you're paying essentially for your own training. You're doing all that sort of stuff. Yeah, because if you're not a draw, you don't get paid. So it's not like, let's say, something like tennis, where down the ranks all the way, people are getting paid for participating in these events. And yeah, you were never going to get the top tier athletes to give up just a little bit of their purse winnings in order to make sure everybody makes money through all those sort of events. And it's kind of the same sort of thing, but now because I feel like there is a shift happening in the ideas as it relates to now that we have older rappers who are much more secure in terms of finances, ideas, and all these things that can actually make a longer term goals for like, yo, let's do this thing over the next 10, 15 years. The one thing I wish Jay always did when he started Tidal is I wish it also came with like an idea of a union again, because I think that until artists have an ability to collectively bargain for their basic contractual things. You know, like the idea of recoupment to me is still the stupidest idea that exists. Like this idea outside of the music industry, it's a ridiculous idea, right? Like, okay, so I made this thing. I'm going to bring it to you. You're going to cut me a check, but I'm not going to see you're going to make all the money until I pay you back from the small percentage that you negotiated. Like what? This, you know, if you were to open up a barber shop, it wouldn't operate like that, right? Like literally it would just be like, okay, when this money is made back, I'll make the money back. Then we profit at X percentage from this point forward.
That's some old school music industry mob ties right there.
I don't even know what it is. When I think about the idea of recoupment, it's so crazy to me. If recoupment didn't exist, just its basic idea, and 360s still existed, I'd be fine. Because I think the 360s are a better benefit for both parties long term. You know, again, recoupment as an idea. That's why, you know, when 50 had that like $1 million no recoup advance, that sort of stuff, it's just kind of like that's what it's weird that no one talks about those things, but like that's the shit that should be talked about now. But you know, these over the next couple of years, the major labels are going to continue to lose to entities that are willing to have more equitable contracts, because other than radio, until iHeartRadio decides it wants to be a label or a streaming service, you know, you don't need to have, you don't need to have these terrible deals anymore. Like we're existing in, even though it's fucked up, because given the opportunity, I definitely would have signed a terrible deal for the opportunity. For the opportunity. Oh, it was terrible. The deal we had on the table with Jive was terrible all around. It wasn't enough money up front, and it wasn't really good points.
Well, this wasn't School's My Hustle, right?
This was in between the In Crowd and what could have been the next album. Right. They wanted to buy like 3 records off of it.
Did Duck Down put out?
Yes. Okay. Duck Down put out all of our records outside of the first one.
Wait, so who put out the first one?
Raucous.
Right.
Yes.
That's right. It was like the relaunch.
The relaunch of Raucous.
Right.
Until they decided to jump in.
I love that album, by the way.
Thank you. But until they decided to jump into your space of the online tech world. Sure. You know, up rocks.
Did you work with Jared?
Brian and Jared? Yeah.
They just got bought by
Yahoo?
Warner.
Was it Warner?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was one of those. I was like, good. That they did exactly what they wanted to do, and what they did, they were able to cash out on that. But that is always the problem, is that the opportunity to have a record really go will always potentially outweigh that first bad deal. You know, at least if it's not a 360 deal. That's where it gets a little dangerous. Back then, it wasn't a 360 deal. So it would have been like, we probably wouldn't have got a lot of money off the album itself, but would have made all the money on the road and whatever else we sort of would have done. But yeah, like that's the biggest sort of thing that I'd like to see change, that I'd like to see some of these other acts start to figure out, is like not taking these bad deals. And also, once you get to a point where you are really financially sustainable and have been around for a minute, turning these larger sort of ideas into something that could be institution building,
right?
You know, But yeah, so out of the
record labels are banks with worse interest.
Yeah, way worse interest.
I mean, if you go, let's say you can go to the bank, you try to take a $50,000 loan out. Yeah, sure, there might be some credit problems. You might have some, maybe you don't even have a credit history a lot of times if you're an artist. But if you get it, you'll have a better interest rate. Even if you don't, but you wouldn't have, distribution. Yeah, you know, infrastructure, you have marketing.
Money. Yeah, it's not the money. It's the ability to have an entire building. Because that's what it takes. To build a superstar is what it takes. It takes, you need to have someone who's had a relationship for 20 years with every single major radio station in the country to be able to call them up and be like, this is the new thing and it's going to go.
Right.
Play it. And if you don't play this, then maybe we won't give you Beyonce or we won't give you, whatever. Like that idea of leverage really does help convert things because you're just looking for a chance to have a record that you maybe believe in just be heard. And we're still playing the same game. It's still the attention game in 2019. It just is now it's a lot more diffuse. That's the one thing I never know if it was better or worse. It's better for a lot of reasons because you don't need these gatekeepers. But the gatekeepers were also kind of like a filter on a lot of shit. So you had there were people that you had to get to that would give you the opportunity. But once you got to those people through whatever weird fucking gauntlet you did, and they fucked with it, what happened after that point is much more massive. Like we're still looking for CD level engagement again from, streaming. Because back when you bought a CD, you're like, all right, I got this shit. I'm gonna sit down and listen to this. And if it wasn't good the first time, you were like, let me listen to it again.
I call that Goody Mob World Party.
Yeah, like you were like, maybe I didn't get it.
Right.
I'm going back and listen to it again. Maybe I didn't. Okay, maybe I like this part. Maybe I like these couple songs.
Maybe I should listen to it while I cut the grass.
Yeah, like you.
Maybe it'll be better if I'm working. Because we're not even in the album era now. It's a singles era.
Which maybe might have always been what it needs to be. When you think about it, the history of music, the album is a very short period of it being super important. You basically have the Beatles make the album important into the, early 2000s. The last important albums, let's say, are probably, Kendrick's. But like, yeah, maybe it is always this weird sort of battle where it's not meant to be that is the most important thing or that, that because the album only existed because the technology existed that way, right? Like when Aretha Franklin passed away, and you're like, she had 90 whatever albums. And you go, yeah, but like some of those were 4 songs. Like, it's just like, it's just like, oh, you had this 7-inch that had this song on one side, this song on another side. That was the album. It's like, yeah, nah. But as, stuff expanded, then you have more room. And it's just like, yeah, maybe in this very disconnected space, the container that is the album is not the most important thing. I still like listening to them because that's how I entered into the space. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm also like, oh, this has to be the most important joint. Because as a DJ, like I'm playing only singles.
Nas said something in a conversation with Steve Stout during South by 2012, I think it was. That feels right. And it's something I hadn't thought about. And he was talking about Illmatic and why it hit the way it did and what the space was like prior to that project. Yeah. And he talked about how hip-hop prior to that was largely a singles era. And he's right. And I hadn't thought about it in that context. Part of me feels like newer genres of music tend to start that way. Because I look at EDM.
Yeah.
EDM is not an album medium. It's a song medium.
Yeah, there are few albums that have been incredibly important in that space. I mean, you maybe have Major Laser's first album, and it's recent stuff. You have like Justice first album, obviously the Daft Punk albums, but yeah, there isn't like
it's not really an album medium.
Yeah.
You know? And I think part of that is what you're talking about as well, right? Once the technology exists, then it allows for that. Theoretically, you can make a playlist as long as you want, right? But that's not how people are digesting music because you're not forced to, right? There's not one CD player anymore.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? It's not I can only put one tape in at a time. So rather than switch tapes every time I want to hear a new song or make my own mixtape tape, I'm just going to listen to this whole tape. There's more, the medium allows for as many songs you want to tell your story, but the fluidity of the medium negates it.
And the medium is much larger now because if your story is, we talk about last year, and obviously, a lot of the conversation around Nicki Minaj was whether or not it was successful, whether or not it was whatever. And, the album kind of came and went when you think about it, right? But her impact on Apple Music, that switch in medium created a whole different conversation. Queen Radio, where it's like, yeah, there was a time when the only way you could communicate was through magazine interviews, television appearances, and albums, right? You couldn't everybody didn't have Nas's beeper number. Be like, yo, I'm about to call you on this cell phone or on this payphone in Queensbridge and just be like, I want to talk to you about something. Right. But now because, it's so mixed medium in terms of all of this stuff, the way to get whatever ideas you have out, and the ideas of what that is successfully, to me, are so different than the container. It's silly to equate it to just this simple container of like whether this album is the thing or not. Because it's like I'm playing Nicki in the club, and whether or not I'm playing her records or her on remixes or whatever, like the Nicki Minaj Brandon conversation continues to be out here and kill.
Feels like the album is the side dish now. It's not the main.
Unless you focus on it. Like when we talk about our boy, Lupe, like to me, that's the best album of last year. Mm-hmm. And it's the best album of last year because it was, you and I have talked about it, something that hasn't existed in the zeitgeist before and was necessary as an album as a concept, or not a concept, but rather a mythology in order to digest it.
I didn't realize it was a double disc until after I'd heard the project. I think that's when he went on Instagram and he said it was truthfully a double disc.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that it changes the mythology. That just means that it may break up what the micro ideas are.
Right, absolutely. I mean, we haven't had storytelling on that level. I don't have something I can immediately compare or have seen.
And so, but it's like,
Lupe's career is kind of mythology, right? Like he's got a lot of characters that have been living throughout. Michael Cool Young History is on, or The Cool is on his first project.
Yes, The Cool is on the first project.
These guys are running around.
Then My Cool Young History on The Cool, the album.
The Cool album.
Yeah. But yeah, so when I look at all this stuff, it's like when I want somebody like that to deliver an album, yes. But I don't need Nicki to deliver an album. I just want great records from her. I think sometimes the financial restraints of a major label contract and that you have to deliver this product idea. Like to see what Ariana Grande is doing is amazing and smart. She's just like, oh yeah, the album came out. Well, here's another song. Mm-hmm. Here's another song in the video. Right. Here's another. I'm just flowing right now. And all that shit I think has been better than the album. Like
I didn't listen to Ariana Grande. I can't tell you.
I mean, I
definitely hear more about the songs than I heard about the album.
Yeah, and that's because, and I think whatever experiment that they're doing in Universal right now is incredibly smart because I think that is a necessary evil to be able to play around and test. But anyway, obviously we can talk about music.
What do you think? What happened to storytelling? Do you feel like storytelling's at a?
Well, I don't think it's gone anywhere. You mean storytelling in rap specifically?
Yes. Do you feel like it's prominent if you're not outside of the album? Outside of 6 artists, do you feel like storytelling is necessary or prominent?
Necessary. It's always been a part, but it's never had to be all of it. Like, when has it ever been all of it?
Either way, look, away from the polls, just broadly speaking, because you do have a lot of singles in history that are narrative based, that are storytelling based.
Sure.
Especially if you look at hip hop.
Yeah.
I don't remember a time in hip hop where the new songs or the big songs or the singles de-emphasized or didn't include storytelling less than what I see now. Like, if I go look at the Spotify Viral 50, if I look at the top charts, if I go listen to what most DJs play, I'm not hearing songs, right? But you take a song like, let's say you take a song like Gold Digger, right?
Yeah.
That's
3-verse
storytelling. And that was in every club or whatever, right? I don't have as many examples of songs like that being...
I don't know. You think about the mid-2000s. You think about the Snap era.
I think
the party to just party kind of era there was not a lot of storytelling in it.
I don't see the gap between the success of those songs as singles and artists like Kanye, who is Snap era, or was around Snap era. Eminem, who is around Snap era. Jay-Z, who is around Snap era.
Yeah.
Stuff Nas was putting out there. Commercially successful singles. Snap era. Lupe around then. Snap era. You can play this game for a long time. There's a lot of artists. I look around now, I don't see...
Well, it's funny because do you consider there to be storytelling in sicko mode?
I think Drake is funny because Drake to me is... I feel like Drake... I don't want to say Drake isn't a storyteller.
Because clearly there's a narrative going on in
there. Is a narrative.
You know, he's talking about, he's doing all kinds of stuff.
Right. But I think that's kind of what Drake does. Like Drake won't give you a whole verse that's a story, right? Drake will give you...
You're in the passenger seat riding around.
Right. He's giving you free thoughts a lot. Like he starts off at lunch, he makes it halfway through, then he remembers that he's the best ever and everybody hated on him and he pulls up. I mean, it's no shot, no shade. I do think there is. I do think there's some storytelling in that song.
That's what
but
I'm
I also
saying.
feel like that song's an exception.
Yeah, but when we think about best songs of the year, if you're thinking about best rap songs of the year, you have to put it up there.
I think it's a different conversation. But yeah, I definitely would. I mean, I think that probably is the song of the year.
But yeah, to answer your, I don't know. I think we go through phases. I think that there is a, although all my friends obviously have children that are old as fuck now, I don't really hang around any of them. So I don't know what like a 15-year-old or 12-year-old, is thinking about when they're listening to a lot of these records. But when I ride Lyft Pool or, Uber Pool or Lyft Share, because I'm a friggin' miser, to the club, and I listen to... Like I got in the car the other day on the way to go DJ, and there was a gay white dude and like a very like regular kind of white girl in the back.
Okay.
And I get in, and they're blasting the Meek Mill and Drake song, and they're like, is this okay that we're blasting this? I was like, yeah, sure. It was like, okay, turn it up, like blasting it. And I want to say the next, but their interaction with the record, I was really on some like anthropological study in the rearview mirror, is purely post EDM interaction, in the sense that like these are kids that were 12 years old, 13 years old when Bauer was, like Harlem Shake and all of these festivals were the thing, and the way that they interacted with music was just this soundtrack to pure fun and turn up. And so I think that a lot of what we're seeing now in terms of success as it relates to rap or hip hop, whatever, is a post EDM success based in it's like, as you know, my ridiculous theory that I don't know when soon will be able to unseat hip hop as the most powerful genre in the world because of its ability to eat all things.
Yeah, right.
It can take, like, I'm going to take that fishing vest and now I made it hip hop, and I'm going to take these sneakers and now it's hip hop, these jeans, boom, got you too. And so it's like
Peter Petrelli in Heroes.
Yeah, it's like Unicron. It can absorb this thing and remake it in its own identity. Right. And that's what it did with EDM. Like, it's like, oh, trap EDM is becoming this thing. And then all of a sudden, you don't hear about any of it. You just hear about rap and trap now, right? Like, right. You don't really hear about EDM in the way, even though obviously Diplo and Skrillex are out here doing all kinds of things. But even they started bending a little closer to what is happening in the rap space. So I feel like we're in this interesting time now where it's not whether there's storytelling or not is at an all-time high or low, because I grew up, fucking K7, Come Baby Come was a rap song. Like, come baby baby come. Like, that shit was a rap record.
That was the same time as you get a song like
Whoop, There It Is.
Or I Wish I Was a Little Bit Taller.
Yeah. So
there was a lot of I agree with you. And that's actually fascinating because I didn't mean to cut you off, but that was fascinating because I've been asking a lot of people that over the past 4 months.
Those songs, storytelling songs, I tell about to drop a gem on you, young folks that may or may not listen to this show. Storytelling songs to me are the songs that can give you a definitive single. And it's the one thing that I tell every person that's working on a project. I'm about to break this shit down. All right. When you look at last year, biggest story-ish telling song, it's of last year, outside of, we have our conversations about Sycamore. But, well, it's not even last year, the year before. Bodak Yellow, right? The song itself, verse-wise, is not necessarily a story. But there is a narrative throughout the entire song that's actually in the hook. The narrative is I used to do that, but now I'm doing this and I'm winning. And to me, Bodak Yellow is Juicy. Now, Juicy's more of a traditional storytelling idea.
It's braggadocio rap. I don't even think Juicy is storytelling. I think it's aspirational. I think that there's
I used to listen to this, used to do this.
All right. I don't think Juicy is, okay, I'll give you that. I think Juicy is narrative based, but I don't think Juicy is the same thing as Bodak Yellow.
See, I think that
they're both like, I started here and now I ended here.
Yeah, I went from ashy to classy. This is the stuff I used to do. This is now what I can do because, and I'm taking you along on this journey. When I mean story, I don't mean in the literal like Ice Cube Today Was a Good Day, right? Sort of idea.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, but I think that in that space there are two kinds of story. There's a
lot of ways to tell a story.
Cardi is telling a story because of pre-existing narratives that already exist outside of the song. The song, we come in injecting story that may or may not exist in it, but because we know already, right? Like we know of all of because the medium is not based now solely in just the song. So we can take what we've learned from Instagram, what we've learned from television, what we've learned from whatever, and then she encapsulated it in this way that is now this rags to riches, story. Mm. And that's kind of what I mean. So when I talk to young artists, it's always about using, like, to me, one of the best records, one of the best first debut singles of the last, 10 years is Day and Night, right? Day and Night is a song that perfectly encapsulated who Cudi was, who his fans might be, and what he represented in the singular idea that made it so that thing immediately could be, the best thing to do is to be a mirror to your potential fan, right? That they could absorb that entire idea and boom, it was done. Trinidad James did that in an interesting way, not in the song, but in the video, right? The video is what made it all of a sudden like, oh shit, there's this world of, crazy, all gold, whatever. And he's got puppies in it. And he's got all this shit going on. Shouts to Motion Family. But it took, what he represented in his perfect way and kind of, again, through the visual medium, told that story that made it work as well as it did. And so that's what I mean is when we look at, I guess you got to consider him a one-hit wonder because I literally don't know any other song. No, what's it called again? Skilo.
Definitely one-hit wonder. No disrespect.
Yeah,
but at least he got the one hit,
which is amazing.
A lot of people still wondering.
Yeah, but when you go back to something like that, it contains all those things. It's a narrative, it's a story, it's this idea of this, short person, who he is, sort of thing.
Wait, does that have a happy ending? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
So I don't know if it's
in the vein of passing me by, where like there is no actual happy ending.
There's no progress.
Yeah, no, you still lost.
Right.
You are the slightly. It's interesting because that's the funny thing. They are stories of ultimately failure.
Right. I like those stories.
No, I agree, but it also again tells a certain kind of when you hear those songs, you knew everything about that person, all that sort of stuff. Right. So anyway, that's what I tell. I still, even though it's not present right now, I still tell people to do those things all the time because I think that's how you create definitive superfan single. Hope you've been enjoying the first half of this recap, no cap. Wanted to move on a little bit to a little bit more serious subject. As often is the case, the minute you dive under the surface of hip hop, then we have to really explore how we can utilize it to improve the culture and the people within it who are often at the bottom as it relates to the socioeconomic ladder. Remember that these are only pieces of the conversation, and if you want to really get a good sense of how in-depth Justin Hunte and Netic went into this, make sure you check out episode 1 of Free Range Podcast with Netic and episode 3 of the Free Range Podcast with Justin Hunte. I think both of those coupled with this will really give you a holistic view of the conversation. You have people opening up charter schools already, right? So it's like, you're all good. So why not try to attack it at the next stage, but then add these kind of extra things to it? Because when I look at the way my university operates, and you went to a school that's not in, let's say, a city, but like even if you talk about these places in cities, what you have is the university is just buying land and buying and expanding in this sort of way, and it's, why not use those tools that are already...
I think it's amazing. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the approach that even Black Wall Street isn't a case study for.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that if there's a way to galvanize mind share, our intellectual capital, and create a pipeline or a cultural hub or an intellectual downstream, it would be a unique approach. Yeah. And I think it would be dope. I think that at some point, people have to decide to follow that mission. Like, I like what Jay-Z's doing, right? And it's funny. I heard an anecdote. I'll keep it off record for who told me this, right? But it was a direct conversation. And so you look at the Grammys last year, right? Jay-Z was nominated for Album of the Year for 444. Rhapsody was nominated for Best Rap Album. And they were anybody on Rock Nation was the only people in the urban categories, we'll say, nominated for anything that wasn't owned by Sony, Warner, or Universal. Yeah. Right. So Jay-Z created an entity that isn't owned ultimately by one of the three major music distribution
Sure, it is
companies.
supported by Live Nation, though, which is
Supported by, but it's not owned by. It's supported
Yeah.
by, right? But it's not owned by, like Live Nation and Apple, for example, are new entrants on their own as well.
Yeah.
But Jay-Z came through the Warner, Sony, Universal bubble, created an entity that is separate enough from the old guard to where now he's competing against them in a sense, in categories that pretty much own every other nominee. So no matter who else was on any of those top 3, 4, 5, whatever, ultimately, if you follow that stream up, those three companies own everybody else.
Yeah.
If you ever been to the Grammys, you've been to the Grammys, right?
No.
If you go to the Grammys, there's all the celebrities they show sitting down in the front row and everything looks glamorous and dope. But in the suites is where Universal is and Warner is and Sony is because they basically own the whole joint. Now, to be able to create an entity separate enough
100%.
is fascinating. And so I was having a conversation, again, these are direct. I mean, these are very, very direct conversations, right? They were, in this conversation, they were saying how all these guys were saying, we'll never make another Jay-Z again. Right? Now think about that, right? You look at how powerful.
But they don't have to now because now you can have someone like Chance.
I mean, maybe. I mean, look, if we're talking about the impact that technology can have or be able to set up your own communities, at some point, when you try to separate your money from the supply chain, that's when people start making it more difficult for other people.
Oh, 100%.
Right? But it's amazing to me that he's been able to do that on the music side. Yeah. We already see the challenges he's having with Tidal, right? Because other people or other organizations are more reluctant to do certain types of business because now you're a competitor. You're not a part of the system. And he's still growing and succeeding. It would, that is the type of long-term persistence as you're describing. I would love to see that go directly into HBCUs. I would love to see LeBron and Jay-Z and Diddy
who cop a buy a spot.
Right. We already see what LeBron has done.
These new ideas.
Right. Build our own. Right. For example, Dr. Dre partnered with Jimmy Iovine at the USC school. Now, I think that's a phenomenal program. It's amazing. I think if we're talking about a potential new Black Wall Street, what it would look like, how it would have to evolve, might not be partnering with USC.
Yeah, it's
not to say that's a good or bad thing, and not saying that it has to go that way. But these are the challenges that every time in history I've seen any of these organizations, you run into these. We talk about J. Edgar Hoover. Mm-hmm. We don't always talk about redlining in the same way. We don't talk about all these other economic forces.
Robert Moses and his fucking
right. Yeah. We don't talk about all the other economic forces that were happening around that same time. Oh, yeah. And those same things, we're watching it happen with Hove's endeavors right now, but those things will be way more pronounced once you really start taking money out. As soon as that happens, then you're going to have stuff like what LeBron's, what's it called? What's his sports agency?
I totally forgot.
I can't think of what it's called.
I'm not a team sports person. So.
Right. LeBron's, Rich Paul, I guess we can't call it LeBron's agency. Yeah. I guess technically it's not. But Rich Paul, Clutch Entertainment. Okay. Favorite story of last year. Favorite disruption story last year. I can't remember the athlete's name. One of the top 10 basketball players in the nation was going to go to Syracuse.
Okay.
He signed to play basketball at Syracuse. Rich Paul talked to this kid, or the kid talked to Rich Paul, whatever. Talked to him, wanted to sign him to Clutch. Decided that, you know what? What they decided to do was, you know what? Decommit from Syracuse. Take the year off. Train as hard as you can. We'll get you an internship at New Balance, who just signed Kawhi Leonard. Get you an internship at New Balance, and the internship will pay you $1 million. And you can learn the sportswear industry. You can become a millionaire now. You can dedicate all of your time to working out and learning new things. Yeah. And then after that year, you go to the NBA draft. Now, your stock might fall a little bit.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the consistent run in that same way. But those runs basically happen for 6 months out of the year.
Yeah.
Then you run with them anyway, and you're already a millionaire. You don't have to risk injury the same way.
Yeah.
Jim Boeheim in Syracuse was really upset. I mean, that type of disruption.
No, but that is what's necessary. I mean,
it's what's necessary. And imagine that going into the, Black-owned HBCU.
Yeah.
On the sports side, but also on the broader economic side. I think it would be there would be a lot of new legislation that pops up.
Worrying about
there's going to be a lot of that.
Infrastructure spending, real estate spending, all that sort of stuff. It's like we can talk about infrastructure in these other countries buying back Harlem may be hard, but buying into Port-au-Prince, buying into, there are places that can use the dollars and turn them in a whole very, very different way.
I definitely don't look at hard as a deterrent. I think all this is hard. I think it'd be hard just to get people to work together, to be honest.
That is actually the hardest thing. And the hardest thing is long-term thinking, I think, for everybody. Yeah.
Well, I've always been, as long as you know me, I've been on some fuck the system shit, right?
Oh, 100%.
But just because I genuinely think the system is broken. It's not from a place of okay, hold on. I take that back. The system isn't broken at all. The system is working exactly how it was designed to work.
For specific people.
Yeah, for very specific people. It is working at optimum efficiency. It's running exactly how it's supposed to be. I just think that this is a shitty system moving forward, right? For particularly people that look like you and I, it's not a great system for poor white people who there are millions and millions of. 100%. It's not a great system for it's not a great system for most people. So I've been thinking a lot about how I articulate solutions around things that I've recognized to be problematic, because I've always been good at pointing out the holes, and I'm okay, well, what do you fill those holes with? So for me, it's one of the thoughts that I have in regards to just okay, how do you create change in systems that essentially are just in this big giant circle jerk where it's the same thing repeated over and over again, and people are all upset about Trump, and I'm oh, okay, really? It's irrelevant. This shit is irrelevant. So my position on wealth accumulation and growth and economic development is really comes from a place of how do we implement new systems that, I think democracy is a farce, except for in spaces of apps and Yelps, where you're literally just you're just a person clicking stars and things like that. So how do you democratize some systems that can be used and empower people? For example, a lot of people have a hard time with understanding, how to contribute to a community and how to create community growth and economic growth within a community. But they don't understand, they do understand numbers. They understand once you tell them how many people live in a community, if you have a community of 10,000 people, if each person gave $2, that's $20,000, right? So if each person in a community of 10,000 people gave $2 every month, that's fucking that's $20,000. That's $20,000 a month. You've got $240,000 at the end of the fucking year. That's a tremendous amount of money that can be done with something. And that's just that's $2, right? And $2 is not a lot of money.
No, of course.
But the problem with that is that the access of getting 10,000 people to move in a particular way seems very difficult until you look at the numbers that apps do, right? Until you look at how many people disliked or liked an app. Then you're holy shit, all these people bought the app, first of all, and then all these people went and fucking said that they liked it or disliked it and then told you why. It's so people are comfortable from their home doing things. They're comfortable from their phone doing things. So if you can make the hack convenient, or applicable in a way that's doesn't actually take them outside of themselves, you can probably get them to do something, right? Yeah. So if we can create, and if you can create, I'm not trying to give away all the things that I'm working on. I don't want, it's proprietary technology that I'm working on here. But if you can create sort of opportunities for financial, like, sort of land banks, where people can say, hey, the whole community is investing, and every year or every quarter of a year, we're gonna fund a business. When that business is going to get $50,000 in startup money, and that we're gonna like pick the best business idea, and that best business idea is going to go through our app's rigorous blah blah blah, where you punch in all the numbers in your business plan and all that shit, and algorithmically it talks about the areas and it asks you a bunch of questions, and it comes out with what we think of the top 5 business plans or top 10 business ideas, and then the people vote on them, and then one business gets the fucking chance to open up in the community of that 10,000 people, right? Yeah. So that's a way to like infuse the money and keep the money moving and circulating within the community, and also outside money happening and money being saved, and business is obligated to give a percentage of its earnings back into that same thing, right? So you can essentially gentrify your own community by being involved in the community. People are always like, well, like capitalism is the problem. And I'm like, no, nothing's really the problem. Like I think that everything is on an evolutionary scale, and like capitalism is what got us to where we are. And
in this phase.
Socialism isn't the problem. Socialism doesn't work, and communism doesn't work, and capitalism doesn't work per se, right? Like there has to be an evolution. Like everything is supposed to be a stepping stone to something else. Like we haven't figured it out, right? So
people don't realize we're making this shit up as we go.
This whole thing is
the whole thing. There is no absolute idea, right? You can't step outside of society. You can't step outside of history and say, oh yeah, that's the thing we should be going towards because that's the thing that worked. It's like, no, fucking the Roman Empire fell, like Greeks done, Egyptians done. Like we talk about great empires, like they've all come and gone. The Mongols ran all kinds of shit and it's a wrap. Like we've created America as it stands right now, this multicultural, capitalist, weird, democratic system is as democracy goes, is the oldest. But as an idea really is the only thing like that really exists like it. Like there's no other, you have smaller countries that maybe, whether you're talking about France or Great Britain and all that sort of stuff. But like, they don't have the sheer fucking land size and diversity that we do. Crazy. We're trying to wrangle like the size.
That's probably the first issue. The first thing that's problematic with America and the American system is how big America is and is trying to function as a singular country. Right, like that in and of itself is difficult because you have different facets and different relationships and people that require different things based on where they are. There's no way that. I mean, this is tangential, I guess. So I don't want to.
No, I mean everything's a tangent.
Yeah,
but I feel like that's the point. Like I think that what people fail to realize is there's a lot of shit we need to deal with. There's a lot of bullshit that has to do with the system.
Right.
But we are making this shit up as we go, and we are at the edge. We're at the bleeding edge of it, right? Like the EU is trying to chase our idea, right? They want to be able to be like, oh yeah, I'm in Germany. I'm just going to go to Paris for the day. I'm just going to drive there and I'm going to kick it. Like that's their idea is like the same thing where we're just like, oh, we're going to Vegas. Or I'm going to Phoenix because I got to go do a club. And I'm just going to drive there. And I don't have to check ID. I don't have to go through any passport thing. I just drove. Boom, I'm there. The fact that we can do that means that it is possible, right? We've proven an impossibility essentially with America as it stands now. It's just about really figuring out, like, how do we break it down correctly so that at the local level, more shit gets done without too many people, without there being a Flint, without there being.
That's what I'm saying is that there has to be real consequences to like shit falling apart.
Yeah.
And there can't be, the problem with capitalism is not just like capitalism, is cronyism, like within capitalism, and sort of like this idea that something is too big to fail. It's like, that's not okay, right? Things have to hurt, like things have to break. Like I talk to my nieces all the time about like it being okay that things suck, that something isn't that they don't like something. I'm like, that's okay that you don't like it. You still have to do it. You're still gonna have to do it. And doing it sulking makes it take longer. Yeah. Like there's something in
that
here
makes
that
it worse on
find.
you.
Yeah, like you can find a way to do it, but like guess what? It's still gonna get done anyway.
Yeah.
Like there's like figure it out. So I guess this is also ties back into how I feel about like Philadelphia and what I'm trying to do in Philly, and other places as well, other spaces as well, because not just Philly, but I understand Philly because it looks so much like Brooklyn. People who have the capacity and understanding and knowledge of self per se, and recognize the value of the human interaction and recognize that the more people participating, the greater the outcome, because the cream will rise to the top in some way. So it's like it becomes inclusive, where you're not looking at like the Flint thing, for example, where you're not like, well, those people don't need clean water, right? That's problematic on so many levels, but beyond just the racism of it, which is obviously there. If you imagined that there was a time when black people could not play in the NBA or could not play football, right, or could not play baseball, or people of color could not play baseball, could not play in these sports, in these arenas, if you thought for 2 seconds about what that game would look like without them right now, it would be miserable, right? That game would be trash. It was their inclusion in the game that made the game grow into what it is now, right? So then, if that's the case, then what is it? Why we're the owners, right? Like how if you're stopping them from being owners, you don't even know what the league could possibly become because you're not opening it up to the individuals, right? To the people to participate in. But that's just, essentially it's on us also to like, I don't need someone to let me in. Like if you're not going to let me in, if I have to tell you that my life matters, then I need to reconsider who I'm talking to, because my life doesn't have to matter to them. Like I'm never going to be out here talking about Black Lives Matter, because Black lives don't have to matter to people who Black lives don't matter to. And I'm okay with that reality. It just sucks because a lot of those people are in position to make my life more difficult or make my niece's life more difficult and all those things. But they still reserve the right to not feel like my life matters, right? Because that's just free will.
A lot of times it's so interesting because traveling as often as I do and being in the middle of the country, you realize that so much of the conversation is filtered incorrectly, right? All these people are watching Fox News. Fox News is on every hotel I come into. Fox News is just on, on the TV, all of that. But also just like, there's no real conversations or interactions with other people. Like it just like it's very easy because let's be honest, as an entire country, most of us do the same thing to other people, right? Like no one is talking about what's happening. Let's say no one really cares about what's happening to the Rohingya right now, right? People being just straight slaughtered, just like
I don't even know who those people are.
There's basically a genocide going on in the world currently. Exactly. See what I'm saying? But
I'm like half smart.
But for somebody in the middle of Nebraska, that's their idea of what Chicago is might as well be that far, right? Because it's like their whole world is right around this whole place, people that they know, and they know the cops. So the cops aren't going to bother them because they went to school with Bobby, who's now, the police officer. Yeah. Like if you're saying fuck the police, it's like, man, you can't say fuck Jimmy. Like that's my guy. Yeah, like we drink after his shift all the time. Yeah. Right? Like, he's not thinking about the cop that is just like, oh, I can't wait to fuck these black people up, right?
Yeah.
And it's really hard.
And I don't even know if those cops really even exist. I mean, I'm sure they do, but like, I know that they exist.
I know that
I've seen. Yeah, I've seen them. I've seen the emails threads.
I mean, my eye is this way because of the dudes who could become cops who are definitely on that sort of shit. Like, I don't know what to do with all this steroids. It's in my system, and I'm in Arizona. I gotta act up. I gotta just bust out.
I gotta hit somebody. Yeah, no, I think that. I mean, that's real. That's one of those things that.
But yeah, we're trying to wrangle that thought, which helps us, right? We can't be a country without somebody who works in the middle of Nebraska that's working on nothing but farmland for hundreds of miles around them that is helping, us feed people, right? Same thing when you go into, but I think they don't realize that, like, all these people that you call illegal immigrants or all that shit is the reason why California is able to give you guys the shit that you can't grow in any of those places, right? Like, we are this big, badly put together version of Voltron that is just trying to, like, fix itself as it walks.
Right.
Like, that's literally, it was just like, oh, that piece fell off.
Yeah, like every other organism. But that's what I'm saying. Like, we're every other organism is doing the same thing, right? Like, my body right now is fighting all the diseases, everything. There's just all the bacteria that are in it. It's just like working.
I give you cancer at all times.
People have cancer all the time, and your body is just like fucking killing it. You know, like, and it's when your body stops killing it that it becomes a problem. So it's like we essentially are we are works in progress as individuals. On a larger scale, we become a community. On a larger scale, we become a neighborhood. On a larger scale, on a larger scale, we become a fucking city. And then on a larger scale, we become a country, or a state, and then a fucking country or territory. So it's like none of this shit is like beyond our comprehension. It's just a matter of understanding, like, what are you going to do with it? What do you want to do with it? How do you want to do it? And are we willing to move forward and change, right? And I think that the issue for me that I see in these conversations and in these or in these scenarios that are sort of like proposed in regards to like politics and people's fear of progress and change is because of the inevitable destruction that's built into it, right? Because you cannot create a safer car until you crash the models that you've made previous, right? Like, you have to crash the cars to make sure that they're safe, right? Like, you have to break eggs to make omelets, right? So progress in society has destruction built into it, right? Like, research and development teams have the destruction built into it. They have experiments built into it where people, like, you have to break shit. And the problem with breaking things in society
they don't
is
want to
that
be the one broken enough. People don't want to.
Exactly. When societies break, people die. But people are dying anyway. And that's the part that's hard for people to compartmentalize, because it's a very, I mean, I think that this is where some of my sociopathic ways could kick in, where I'm like, I may have a little bit of sociopath.
He dies.
Yeah, and I don't mean it from that place where it's like where we're targeting, because that's what's been done, right? Where you target individuals to suffer along the way in the name of progress, but it's not even real progress. It's just like maintenance. Like, in the name of maintenance, Flint's gonna suffer. Those people of Flint are gonna suffer because who gives a shit, right? Whereas my argument is that, well, people are suffering anyway, so let's people suffer in the name of progress, right? You can't take away. We need to be doing things that are challenging the spaces that we're in already, so that we can move forward, right? I don't care about power. I care about progress.
Hopefully you enjoyed this hodgepodge recap, no cap episode of Free Range. We'll be back next week with a new interview, new conversations, new things to ponder on. But if you enjoyed these snippets, make sure you go back and again check out episodes 1 through 13. I think that they're In going back, I realized there's so many conversations that need to continue. And as I accumulate more, I'm definitely going to take stock of them and try to chunk out pieces that I think are really important for you to tune into. See you next time.